A very warm welcome once again to the High Performance Human podcast. As always, it's your man Andy here, and today we have got a lad that I've grown a huge amount of respect for in a relatively short period of time. Ryan Jenkins, the co-founder and CEO of the Hype Society, which is a specialist strategy stretch. I should put my teeth in. Right. Before I start these podcasts, should put my fucking teeth in, right? Strategic specialists. They specialize in making sure that everybody that comes on board with them doesn't just get their marketing executed appropriately. They actually get it done with not just a short-term execution, but long-term strategic thinking in mind. Now, Ryan, one of the reasons why I've had so much respect for Ryan is the fact that he's bootstrapped his way to two very, very successful businesses and basically done it off the back of his own graft hard sweat and he's done it all with the attitude of gratitude, which is just such an amazing thing to see. He doesn't bang on about it though. He just keeps on keeping on and he keeps on helping people to really get their hype heard about and get it heard about in the right way. Massive amount of respect for how this lad goes about his business. Ryan Jenkins, how are you? I hope to God you've got your teeth in today.
Hopefully my teeth are in, mate. Pleasure to be here with you, Andy. Thanks for having me. Really grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today, mate.
No, look, pleasure's all mine, man. And it's you were someone that I wanted to reach out to, and then ironically, gang, it was while I was having a conversation with someone else around a couple of key topics around this whole world of marketing and getting your voice out there and all that sort of jazz. And Rhino's name popped into my head as I was having this conversation, and then sure as eggs is eggs, the world as it is, he sends me a message later that day, which was absolutely, it was just bizarre. I swear, I think he's got one of like the primitive versions. You know how like social media follows you, right? And your phone's listen to you. I reckon you've got like fucking human mechanics version of that going on, or you plan to.
Retargeting for intuition.
Yeah. You've retargeted intuition, right? Oh, that's such a good thing. That's such a good phrase. We should use that. Anyway, so Ryan, before we crack on into the things that I really want to dig into your expertise and awareness around, give everybody and all the listeners a bit of an idea as to who you are, what you're about, and how you've got to this point.
How I've got to this point. So who I am, I'm Ryan Jenkins. I'm an entrepreneur and marketer. That's what I love to do. I love business. I love marketing. I love people. I love leadership. And I love sales. And that's been my whole career. I've been in sales and marketing for over 20 years. I started at Census selling white pages enhancements to business owners in the early 2000s, and then worked my way into digital marketing, and now find myself running a boutique strategic marketing and branding agency. So, but yeah, sales, marketing, and leadership sort of runs through my veins, and that's what I like to do. And I love working with people. I love to talk. I love finding creative solutions and sharing, my insights with everyone that I can to hopefully help people not make, the same mistakes and learn from the things that have worked well for me. So, over the last 8 years, I've founded 2 7-figure agencies, and I'll hopefully, hit that 8-figure number one day. But more importantly, it's about having fun and helping people for me.
What was your school background like? Were you decent at school? Were you a bit of a
No.
flog? What was the go?
I was pretty sporty, AFL sort of kid. Just really went to school to hang out with mates. Probably the only subject I did like was sort of business management and economics. And I was a little bit frustrated that, school didn't really cater for that. It was much more sort of textbooky, and I didn't sort of float my boat. I left school. I grew up in Narre Warren. I went to Hallam High. Back in those days, it was the Bronx, the outer southeastern suburbs was pretty rough and tough. So I didn't really do that well at school. I passed, with mid-range sort of rankings. And then I actually went and got a job at Foot Locker, selling sneakers, which I loved. Nike TNs and really sort of sinking my teeth into retail sales, and worked my way up through the ranks there to a district manager looking after a few stores in the outer southeast, and then sort of hit my ceiling. There's not a lot of money in retail, and then I applied at Census for a telesales gig and started selling advertising to business owners, and really learning my sales craft with only my voice, without being able to see people, read body language. I was purely sort of phone-based sales, and really struggled for the first few months. It was a really difficult time to sort of find my feet. But then, I really worked hard at that and did extremely well at Census, moved my way through to account management, sales training, sales leadership, into what they call a channel manager. So I had sort of 12 managers and 120 sales staff that I was looking after. So it was a very, very good learning ground for me, very professional, high growth organization, invested in training, learning and development, and really gave me the opportunity to work with salespeople to teach them the craft, which I loved to do.
Now, clearly you've got a penchant for growth, like personal growth, right? You've clearly got an appetite for personal growth, and that obviously shows through your career to date. Now, when it came to, when you were, slightly younger and whatnot, did that growth, was that sort of need to want to get better always there, if you're honest with yourself, or was it something that you kind of fell into, or you sort of accidentally sort of stumbled across this ability to be able to grow and lead him? Because you mentioned at the start of this when you said that you're into sales and helping people and all the rest of it, but clearly there was something in you that allowed you to really put your energy into that level of growth. So
Yeah.
is it something that you always had an awareness of, or is it something
Not
that
really.
you stumbled across?
Yeah, it was something that I stumbled across. I mean, I surprised myself with how well I did at Foot Locker.
Mm.
And the passion for the brand, the passion for the business. I loved the product. It wasn't a hard product for me to sell. I actually loved being driven by the performance KPIs. I loved to hit my numbers. So I strove consistently to, outperform my previous personal bests, and, review my weekly and monthly performance, and really get gratification out of that success. And then that just led me, to strive for better always. And it wasn't competing against other people. It was always sort of competing against myself to do better. I have had always a thirst for development and not resting on my laurels. And I think that was ingrained within me. And that's something that's still, to this day, if we have a good week, a good month, a good quarter, a good year, it's like, okay, that's great. What can we do better next time? What worked well? And this is basic for me now. It's a SWOT. What did we do well? What did we not do well? Where are the opportunities at? What are the external threats to, preventing us from achieving those outcomes? So I think that having more experience and more structure around things to look for, seeing problems quicker. I'm very focused on problems. As soon as one problem's solved, I'm looking for something else to sink my teeth into. So I think a lot of it is ingrained, but also a lot of it, now that I'm conscious and aware of those things, I embrace that. And I actually really enjoy the challenge of that growth pathway. To now, like, I get up at 5:30 every day. I walk for 1 hour listening to podcasts, consuming audiobooks, because I don't have professional development. There's no one there coaching me. There's no one there leading me. I don't have a training department. There's no one that's, there to support me as a CEO coach or as a leadership coach. So I've got a constant thirst for more information so I can then be better and impart that knowledge to my customers or to my team.
Now, there's a few things I want to dig into with that. But before we do that, we always have this tradition here on the HPH podcast, and it is I'm very, very interested to hear what my guest's definition of a high performance human is. Now, I've got this belief that there's four elements to it, right? Being success, connection, influence, and happiness. And they all operate in an ecosystem where one can't survive without the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is your definition of a high performance human? Bearing in mind, though, that essentially you never felt that you were born to be the leader and the sort of operator that you've become.
So I actually really enjoy coming from the position of being an underdog. I've got a really good mate of mine who's also an entrepreneur, and he grew up in Melton and I grew up in Narre Warren, right? And respectfully, those suburbs, back when we grew up, weren't the most affluent, but we appreciate the resilience and the hustle, and that we didn't have any money, but we had to make money, and we had to work for things. And, I think that I really sort of embrace that, I'm always the underdog. Even if I was, incredibly successful in people's eyes, I don't see myself as that. I'm going to find the next business or the next person or the next thing that I can, again, restart as the underdog, because I really enjoy the challenge of coming from behind, because that's what sort of lights me up and sort of gets my fire burning. So I'm conscious and aware of that aspect of my psyche, and I leverage that to my best interests. And going back to your initial question, when I thought about this, I think about high performance now in a far more balanced way than I previously did. So I look at it, emotional high performance, which is about emotional regulation and self-awareness. I look at professional optimal performance as, being better than where you were yesterday. So I look at that as incremental improvement. I look at physical health. So, going to the gym and sticking to my routine, my morning walks and my 4 to 5 gym sessions a week to keep my physical health in check. I look at it, in terms of my eating habits and keeping my weight under control. I wasn't blessed with the fastest metabolism in the world, so I have to work a little bit harder at that point. And then the last one is my spiritual well-being and creating time and space for myself to do things like mindfulness and meditation and taking some time away, because I find that really does help me sort of balance. And I'm really enjoying that element too. Like, I was a terrible meditator before, and I was very easily distracted. And now I can find myself in a much more calm state wherever I am. No matter what's going on, I can do that really well. And I'm finding that to be a big help to sort of disconnect from the rat race.
Interesting. I like how you've broken it down into different elements. Do you feel that in every element, though, it's underpinned by your initial statement, which is that underdog mentality? So, even if you look at the spiritual side of things, which inherently isn't an overly competitive space, the spiritual world is not about being competitive and seeing who can meditate the longest or anything like that, right? But do you feel that just having that underdog mentality, that constant feeling, I've got to be careful how we say this, right? Because we don't want to turn this into inserting the negative thing. That feeling of not being as good as what you think you can be, or not being,
exactly that.
Do you feel that, and let's dig into this, this underdog thing. They say that there's that age-old phrase of comparison is the thief of joy, and in order to be an underdog, you have to be in comparison to something, someone, some movement, something or other, right?
Yep.
Back in the day when and by the way, team, for those of you that don't know where Narre Warren and Melton is, they are outer suburbs of Melbourne in Victoria, Australia, right? For those of you that are listening from overseas. Did you feel that back in the day when you understood the value of money because you didn't have great amounts of it? Were you back then, or even to this day, when you're looking at your own spiritual journey, even, are you comparing yourself in order to feel that underdog level of motivation? Do you feel yourself comparing to world leaders, for example, in a spiritual sense, or
I do,
a business sense? Firms that are X amount bigger than yours, or they're doing this 8 figures or the 9 figures
Yeah.
or whatever it is. Do you
Yeah, I
feel
do.
yourself you feel yourself in constant comparison?
Yeah, I do, but not in a negative, more as an aspirational comparison,
Mm,
because I want to know what people before me have done and what's possible. So one of my clients did a 2 day silent retreat a couple of weeks ago, and he found that to be really transformative. And then I just sort of sat on that and thought, how could I even ever imagine myself being able to be silent for 2 days, in a retreat. But that's exciting to me to be able to work towards something like that. So at least I have a goal. And if I do achieve that goal, then it would, there'll be something else that I'll set that'll take me to whatever the next level is after a 2 day silent meditation retreat. And everything in my life's like that. If I've got a goal to lose weight, for instance, if I've achieved that goal, it'll be okay, what's next? I attempted 75 hard at the start of this year and got through 31 days of that. And it's like, I failed, but I still did, 30 odd days of a pretty intense,
it's better
program of
than
work.
failing by not
Right.
starting.
Yeah. And I
Yeah,
was proud
for
of
sure.
myself for that. And
Mm.
there was circumstances and there was decisions that I made, and I made them consciously. And I thought, well, that's a fantastic start. Next time, what can you do better and different to get to the 75? And again, like that's how I look at most things, in my life. It's like the rear view mirror, and the windscreen, I suppose. And I'm conscious and aware of both of those views on almost everything.
Mate, I think we've stumbled across something here because if you look at, and it kind of ties into one of the topics that I wanted to talk to you about, which is the whole topic around vanity metrics and how someone that comes from a marketing space and a brand space as you do, views the metrics and how they compare to actual performance of whether it's a campaign, a brand, an individual, whatever, right? And there's a heck of a lot of the vernacular, and I've been beating this drum that we really shouldn't be comparing ourselves to anyone else. We really should be running our own race and
Sure.
being the people that we ought to be, as opposed to worrying about being anybody else. But what you said there is it's actually a relevant point because if you look at the way that particular elements of society are operating right now, you could argue that there is a meritocracy in respect to how much ambition people have. And it's almost like the minority of people that have that level of ambition to drive forward and succeed is getting less and less and less and less. Like that, it's that crust of ambition on society is getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And there's a
Uh-huh.
greater majority that are happy to tread water and become and just be a part of someone else's tribe as opposed to having their own voice and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Um, Whereas from your point of view, you could argue that if you were to take the energy of comparison and translate it into an aspirational energy whereby we look at what could be and use that to break our own limiting beliefs around what we think we can achieve, right? Then it flips comparison on its head and turns it into an entirely positive thing, which is really really interesting. Now let's sort of segue into that marketing setting, like put it into that marketing world because you know I do believe that a lot of people in society are really they restrict themselves and they constrict themselves because of that those vanity metrics, that need to feel seen, or that feeling that need to feel validated, right, by
Yeah.
the number of likes that they get on a particular post or whatever. And we all fall foul to it from time to time, right? If we've put a hell of a lot of effort into a particular thing that we've then pushed out there and then it's had crickets across the
Yeah.
board, we kind of go, oh, fuck. And that didn't get the fire that I was hoping it would get.
Yeah.
Um, so, mate, when we talk about this comparison thing, talk to me about the negative aspects from a marketer's point, from a branding specialist point of view, and then tell me about how you can also use that as positive.
Well, there's 2 points to make there. So I think every successful campaign would have had an element of research attached to that. So whether that's competitor analysis, whether it's, previous campaign styles, so there's an element of research, which is, benchmarking, inspiration. What have those before me done successfully that I can take insights and data points from to help me develop inspiration on how I can execute on the campaign strategy that I want to put together for my client or for my business.
Mm.
And then the second element of that is around using successful campaigns not as the not as your idea, but as a source of benchmark. So you've got somewhere to go with that. And then there's also things like persona development. So, when you're looking at developing a campaign, you then need to understand how to develop the person that you're talking to, and then understanding those personas as well. So your campaign, is not ever going to work well if it's constructed for everyone.
Now, with that, if we're to take it like from a personal brand point of view, right? What I'm hearing there is there's a clear, to give yourself any shot of anything going in any way, shape, or form well, preparation precedes any execution, any successful execution, shall we say, which is something that lots of people hear about all the time. Is it safe to make the link, just based off what you've said, that as long as we as human beings, irrespective of whether we're doing a personal brand, a business, whether we are just putting something out there, an opinion into the world of some description. God, this is going in a really cool direction. Can we say that as long as we have put in an appropriate amount of thought and preparation into something that we are about to go out into the world with, therefore we are in a much better position to be able to take any sort of feedback, metrics, momentum or lack thereof in a much more constructive manner, because of the fact that we've prepared ourselves and become curious about the world that we're about to project into before we've gone and done it. Is that fair?
So let me answer that in a slightly different way. Your brand, whether it's personal or professional, will have values. Your values aren't going to align to everyone, nor should they.
Mm.
Your values are aligned to give you stakes in the ground that you attach your business or your personal brand to. And then the challenge is to communicate them creatively and authentically to create either connection or disconnection, because branding is as much about turning customers away as it is to attract them. We talk about maximizing engagement, but also moving the customers away from this campaign that aren't going to be relevant to us. Because if your non-customers engage, then you're wasting your money. So we only want to land the message to the target customer that we're after based on the personas we've created, based on the values we're trying to align the business to.
Mate, I really like what you just said there. That's rather powerful. That it's as much about disconnecting the disinterested as it is about connecting the ones that you want to have interested in your message.
Yeah,
that's a really interesting point, because we, especially the Gen Zs, they love being a part of a movement that's greater than themselves, stereotypically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the fact that the world has got that many world-based issues, right? It seems to be the trendy thing to support situation X or campaign Y or whatever the case may be, right? But the challenge that comes with that is that people, although they want to be accepted by customers, popular opinion, so on and so forth, they're not preparing themselves for the disconnect that they
Correct.
create on the other side. Now, you're
Correct.
saying that a lot of that preparation is around understanding the need to disconnect from certain people because of the fact that your values ain't going to align and all that sort of stuff, which is absolutely spot on. But it's the active understanding that you are going there consciously to disconnect with certain types of individuals.
Yeah. And I would be like, let's look at the facts. Like 99.9% of people aren't going to be your customer. Even if the most successful brands in the world, like Apple, still have Android as a competitor of half of the world. So no matter how successful you become, you're still going to have a very, very large percentage of people that aren't going to be your customers. So you shouldn't be wasting time, effort, and resources on trying to attract a customer that's never going to be your customer. You should be actively trying to turn away the vast majority to find the most passionate connections you possibly can based on the values that you want to connect with. So in my mind, it's actually the opposite of what people are trying to do. They're trying to fit in. They're trying to please everyone when they should be trying to not fit in and please anyone.
Mate, I think we've stumbled. And I tell you what, gang, listeners, proactive disconnection. I think we're going to label that. That needs to go into your notes ASAP. Because, again, let's go back to what our original part of the original conversation, which was comparison is the thief of joy. If we go into anything that we want to achieve with that concern of being compared to and against, then we're always going to limit the energy that we put into something, right? We're always, whether we want to or not, there'll always be that little sort of conserving of, even if it's 5% of energy and enthusiasm, just in case you need it for a rainy day, right? But if we are to go into these things actively, proactively looking to disconnect with those that aren't going to want to jump on the train anyway, and we're not saying, and I'm sure, Ryan, I'm sure I'm safe in saying that we're not saying that you're actively going to be a dickhead to those that don't agree.
Correct.
Right? Of course,
No.
we're not talking about just being a knob for the sake of it. But if you can proactively disconnect or even identify those that are likely to not want to connect with your message, brand, product, service, belief, whatever the case may be, then the ability to accept it when people disagree or disconnect or don't believe or whatever it is, it becomes a hell of a lot more palatable, doesn't it?
It actually makes the biggest difference. Like when I'm talking to partners or new clients, I actively talk about who we are and who we're not. If you're looking for this, then we're not the right partner for you. However, if you're looking for this, then we are. So then right from those first points of engagement, there's no false expectation that we're a magic pill, like there's a one size fits all approach, that this is going to be easy, that there's a quick fix. Like none of those things are real. If you want a long-term partner, you want to be strategic, you want us to challenge the status quo, you want us to call out things with honesty and authenticity, then that's where we're going to fit for you. So and there's a lot more there's a lot more to it than that, but like in those first levels of engagement, like I'm trying to qualify out as much as I'm trying to qualify in.
We're onto something here, my man. We are onto something here in a big, big way. Because for so many people, they restrict themselves. They limit, or they have this ridiculous but it's understandable barrier to entry to even take one step forward towards achieving anything more than where they are already at, purely based on the fact that they are worried about what other people are likely to say and do.
Mm-hmm.
It's an inherent issue that humanity has, right? And because of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, everyone's after certainty and security. That generally comes in the form of a tribe, which is why we are, by nature, tribal beings, all that sort of jazz, right? But there is absolute merit in saying that in order to reach anywhere near the human potential that is within any of us, the need to be able to accept the criticism is absolutely apparent. However, the way in which leaders in society and all these successful people, well, the way that the vast majority of them talk about that is to just accept rejection and eat rejection for breakfast. And I love rejection and all this sort of bollocks, which is nonsense. No one likes fucking rejection. But if you can look at it constructively before you even set forth on your journey, then if you're prepared, then it's like me and my auctions. I always prepare for the worst and the best outcome. And this is kind of what you're talking to a little bit here. But when it comes to us putting our messages out there, we don't do that anywhere near enough. That's fascinating. It's really, really interesting. From your point of view, though, and I'd love to dig into the early sort of years of your growth in business, right? When you start your own businesses and stuff. There's a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are either in early phases, they're in startup phases of business, or they're just about setting forth on their journey. And for a lot of people, they really struggle with that whole thing of only taking on the consumers, the customers, the clients that really are the right clients for them. And they take on anything because they need that short-term revenue and whatnot. Going back to your early days, did you have a battle with that initially, and it took a while for you to get to the level that you're at now, where you're saying, you know what, we're not for you? Because that's something that for a lot of people, they understand that that's something that they perhaps need to do, but their bank balance is basically telling them otherwise.
Yeah. This is something I learned the hard way. So, I also implore business owners, early entrepreneurs, to take on as much as you can in the skill set that you have, because you will be surprised that some types of clients may be a good fit for you, and you're going to learn really fast the ones that aren't, and that's going to help you gather the data points that you need to then make decisions around how you're going to either diversify or isolate. So my early years were just, it was revenue, and it was just and I solved that problem by just refining my product suite. So just going after search, for instance, just selling Google ads and SEO, because I knew we could do that for almost anybody. It didn't matter how big or small you were. It was just about how many people can I sell this product to, and we would make it work because we had the talent, we had the experience to do so. Where my challenge was when I started to increase the product suite, which is when I started to get into more strategic types of businesses where I didn't have the capability, where I didn't have the experience, where I was learning new things, where I was, fucking things up, when I was making mistakes, when I had to, tell clients that we were missing deadlines, where we made errors, where we couldn't, complete a project for whatever reason. That's where I sort of found that I ran into problems. The other problems I had was not having enough growth. We actually grew far too much, too quickly in our second or third year of business. We went from about 600,000 to 700,000 to almost 2.5 million in a 12-month period. And that was as catastrophic as it was good. All that money we made, we essentially just over-resourced and burnt the whole lot, to the point where we had to then reset, downsize, and go again. So it's a double-edged sword. Having huge growth is not always a great thing, but as a business owner, you're just looking at, like, we're 300% year on year. How amazing. Well, that's great at that level, but the rest of the business is capitulating. So every business is different. Every journey of an entrepreneur is different. It's just, that's just, have a crack is all I can say to someone that's sitting on the fence. Just start, even if it's a side hustle. Like, you don't have to quit your day job and have 6 months worth of cash flow. I was still working full time, and I was managing 5 full-time staff. I was doing 17 hours a day when I first started my first business. So that's the only way I could have financial security with a 1.5-year-old daughter at home, and then also be able to live out my entrepreneurial dream, at the same time. So mornings for 2-3 hours work through my lunch break, work all the way home, and work once I got home, plus my 40-hour a week day job for 10 months to get myself even close to the wage that I was on before. So again, that was my choice. I could have saved some money. I could have waited another couple of years, and I could have had a more relaxed journey, but I just don't work that way.
What was it within you that made you stay loyal to that path? Because it's not easy, especially if you throw in young kids into the mix and whatnot as well. It's not easy to stay committed to that sort of journey, right? I mean, you talked about, the fitness side of things, your health and fitness. You did try the 75 hard. You got 31 days in and you stopped, but you were, you reflected and retrospectively appreciated the fact that you'd even done the 31 days in the first place. But when it came to that part of your story, you clearly didn't give up, and there was clearly a level of commitment that took you beyond normal realms of what a human would normally do. What do you reckon it was that made you stay as committed as what you were?
There's more to the backstory. So that was the second time I had a crack. The first time I had a crack, I was with another business partner. There was 2 of us co-founders. We didn't have the resources. We didn't have the skill set, the experience. We sold a bunch of stuff we couldn't deliver on. I then had to work on handing over that entire portfolio to someone that could, just because from an integrity perspective, I just didn't have the heart to do that. I knew that it wasn't going to work. So I did that. I handed off all of those clients, and then I went and worked in an agency environment for another 12 to 18 months to really build up my commercial acumen, build up my strategic acumen, understand more of the nuts and bolts of performance marketing in more detail. So I ran it for 6. I put it on the shelf for 1.5 years. I then had another full-time job for almost 1 year. So I'm talking about 2.5 years of time, what I would call training and experience before, 2.0. By the time I got to 2.0 and it was starting to work, that's what gave me the confidence. And I just actually gave myself tingles because I'm like, it's working. We're growing. I'm hiring. We're getting results. Like, this is what it feels like. And that 2.5 year journey, even to the start line, to relaunch and to start winning and getting some really solid growth numbers, getting to the point where I was sort of hiring every month and a half, a new employee to complete more work for my business was incredibly gratifying, and then that's where I started to really double down, triple down, and I knew that I was going to get my dream of being an entrepreneur in the digital marketing industry. And at that point, month 9, month 10, I then went into the business full time. And that's when we just exploded. Like, we had insane growth over that next 12 to 18 month period. That's when I broke everything. The operational procedures weren't right. Our team wasn't right. So that's where I had to sort of really look long and hard at what the future of that business was to become, and make some really hard decisions and decide to go one step back to take, 4 or 5 steps forward. So it was a long journey even to the start line for
me. We've uncovered some serious gold here, because honestly, gang listeners, you know me by now. Best laid plans and all that with respect to what I have intentions on talking about, and then what we end up talking about. But I think this is tremendous stuff, because what Ryan is saying is one of the things that's absolutely underpinned his story and his success to this point and whatnot is it's a couple of things. There's an inherent understanding as to who and what he's connected to and with, and who and what he's disconnecting from. He gets it. He understands why he's disconnecting from these people, and he's cool with it. Right? He's cool with it. And if we were to all think back as to moments where we stopped ourselves from trying something or going forward with something or posting something even as menial as putting a post up on social media, right? And we stopped ourselves from doing it because we were worried about who we were going to be disconnecting from. If we were to take the lesson that we've got from Rhino just now and process the probability of who we could potentially be disconnecting from, and then by processing it, by accepting it, becoming a lot more comfortable with it, then two things. One, if it happens, it happens, but you're already aware that it was going to happen and therefore you're okay with it. But, and I bet you would agree with this, Ryan, the amount of times where you thought you were going to disconnect with people and you end up, and they end up just jumping on the train anyway, right?
Yeah. Well, people connect with authenticity. People connect with genuine people. And I find the ones that are putting posts up to please an audience that's not theirs, it's away from the truth. It's away from that authentic person that they are. So therefore they're not even attracting the type of customer that, or the type of engagement that they want to target. It's counterproductive. It's like, I want to do what's going to please everybody, but then that thing never pleases anybody because it's actually not you.
Man, this is great stuff, team. And whether when you're listening to this from a business perspective or whether you're listening to this from a personal perspective, either way, this is applicable stuff. And this is incredible stuff that is absolutely inherent. When I'm thinking back to all the high performers that I've spoken to date and all the ones that I've looked up to or compared myself to or what have you, one of the key things that they all have in common is they are comfortable with who they are accepting and or who they are connecting with, and they are also, as much as they are comfortable with who they are disconnecting from. Or that is really, really interesting.
All of the leaders in content, in podcasting, are all unapologetically authentic to themselves. Everyone I listen to that's world beating in terms of this space is just knows who they are and wants to exude as much of that as possible, and going, if you're not cool with that, cool, don't follow me, go follow someone else. If you like that, jump on the wagon, because that's what you're going to get more of on volume.
Well, I think the bit that I love about how you've put it, how you've articulated it, though, is that if you look at the majority of these people that are leaders and thought leaders and so on and so forth, very rarely do they even acknowledge because they are so one-eyed about who they are and what have you. But the people that follow them don't realize, because a lot of those thought leaders and they'll be subconsciously, they won't even be doing it on purpose. They just subconsciously don't give a shit about who they disconnect from, right?
Yep.
Which is what you just said there.
Don't even worry about that.
Exactly. But what I really like about what you've just said there, man, is so much more prevalent and important for people to hear, because for the majority of people, they don't have that part of their DNA. They don't have that gene to not be able to not give a shit, right? Mm-hmm. The vast majority of us human beings give a shit about what other people say, whether we want to admit it or not, right? Doesn't matter how big and ugly we are. If someone calls us big and ugly, there's going to be a bit of us that's going to be a little bit upset about it, right?
Yeah.
But what you've just said there, if you can, instead of just playing to the narrative and ignoring them, because you can't, because the majority of people can't, actually process who you may disconnect with first, because then it becomes a lot more palatable. As opposed to anticipating what could come, or getting anxious about what could come, and then having that stop you from even giving it a crack.
even Joe Rogan says, I never read the comments. He doesn't want to know what people think, because even he wants to even be more authentic and not even one iota conscious of what people are saying. He's like, I've never read any comments.
Well, the reality is, Ryan, Joe Rogan is a 0.00001%,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
And the vast majority of people will fucking read them comments, whether they say they do or not, right?
Yeah.
And the vast majority of the celebrities and the leaders, they'll all read that shit, whether they admit it or not. Very rarely do you get someone that is so loyal to their own voice, right? Because, like I've mentioned before in this episode, we are inherently tribal beings, right? We are by nature pack animals. So there is going to be, for the vast majority of us, unless you are part of that absolute minority of human beings that is so deeply in agreement with who they are, which is such a minority. What you're saying is so much more useful to people, because if you can prepare for it, then it means that you can make more positive comparisons. Like I said, if we can do this proactive disconnection, or actively be aware of the people that we could be disconnecting from, then when it comes to that comparison piece, it allows us to then be able to compare ourselves to that which we aspire to in a much more positive way. So instead of us worrying about what we're losing, we can focus on what we're gaining
100%.
to a much greater extent, man.
Yeah.
That's fucking mint. That is so. I've not like, of all the episodes we've done and all the stuff that we've learned along the way, team, if this one isn't giving you a couple of little goosebumps, I'm not sure what will. Because this is huge. This is one of the biggest barriers to entry for so many people when it comes to going for something that is higher than themselves or higher than their current level of existence. And Ryan, what you've just articulated there is a massive key to a massive lock. Fuck, man. Why didn't I get you on earlier? Mate, and this is so not what we were going to talk about. This is so not what we were going to talk about. But this is so much better than what we were going to talk about. This is mad. Mate, let me ask. Because no one's made of Teflon, right? And you're not as much as I'm not. Give us a moment, give us a moment where you have really, really struggled with this.
So the hardest moment I've had in almost my entire life was when my two previous business partners decided that we were going to sell the business, and I wasn't for that, and I vehemently pushed back from that. However, the decision was made. I was stood down while they facilitated the sale of the business. So I was essentially pushed out of the business that I founded. I was excluded from all of the process because I wouldn't support the process. So thinking in my head, I've done all this work. I've created this amazing brand, this amazing business for all of these people. And I'm essentially being, pushed out, to the side, for them to do what they wanted to do. Was probably a time where I'm like, oh my God, what's everyone going to think of me? Like, what have I, like, how's it got to this point? So, the doubt monster was, on both of my shoulders, telling me things that, you should have done this, you should have listened to that, you could have done this differently. And I just had this, I was just overwhelmed with, what have I, like, how have I allowed this to happen? And the negative self-talk that I was sort of going throughout that process was like nothing that I've dealt with before. And I think it was where my biggest lessons were also learned, because I walked away with, in integrity. I walked away knowing, after a certain point that I'd done it in the way that I had the skills and the experience to do. What we'd done was amazing, and it was out of my control at that point. And to then essentially then start from scratch to build the Hype Society allowed me to take my 5 to 6 years of experience in the industry and in business to then be able to look in the review mirror, to review all of the things that I'd learned, all the experience that I'd gained, to then be able to do things better, faster, smarter, and stronger, with more control as well. So, that was probably a time where, I was insanely concerned with what people thought of me. How was I even going to tell people what had happened and why it had happened? Because in most people's minds, that business was Ryan Jenkins to the day that it actually wasn't, so wow. I was the brand until I wasn't the brand anymore. And that was really hard. That was a really hard time. So, but as I said, like, it was also, I'm really grateful to go through that experience. It made me a better person. I'm far more resilient. The experience that I gained, I'm really grateful for. And, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today without going through, those lessons and picking myself up and doing it again. I could have just gone and done consulting. I could have taken a 9 to 5. I could have got paid good money. I could have partnered with someone else and, done it in a different way. But I wanted to prove again to myself, all right, you're the underdog again. Get up, let's go. And we went, and here we are. So it's I think those lessons, the hard ones, are where you learn the most. And I think that most people attest that most hard things is where you've had the biggest lessons.
That would have been really difficult when your own person is so deeply connected to something that you've built. Like, a business is like someone else's baby, right? So to effectively have your baby taken away from you, that would have been an incredibly challenging moment, but obviously something that has stood you in great stead for where you've got to today. Ryan, man, I could talk to you ad nauseum, and I've got no doubt that you're probably going to have to. Well, you're going to have to, because we haven't talked about any fucking thing that we wanted to talk about today. But this episode was so much worthwhile. It was like so much worthwhile. I can't thank you enough. This has been such a great conversation. And team, those you guys listening, my word, we've stumbled across a couple of absolute diamond bits of information that you need to go away and consume and pontificate on and ruminate on. You need to. Like, I would say you have to. Don't tell you guys that are listening to do much, but I'm telling you now, you're gonna have to pay attention to these lessons that we've looked at here. Comparison is the thief of joy, but aspiration, by looking at where you want to get to, is absolutely worthwhile. Positive comparison, preparation in who you're going to actively potentially disconnect from by going along the path that you want to go on, allows you to be able to process that disconnect if it happens. But who knows if it's going to happen or not, right? You find out who your people are and who they're not, and it's okay as long as you've prepared yourself for it. Interesting stuff. Really, really interesting. Now, Ryan, before
just one thing before you close up, the more you post, the more people you talk to, the more you have a crack, the faster you're going to learn what your values, what the values that you're most passionate about are, who's connecting with those. So, don't be afraid to post, to talk, to advertise and test those messages, because you'll just learn faster. The more you procrastinate, obviously, it's stealing time and opportunity away from you.
For sure, my man. For sure. Now, one last thing. that we always ask all of our listeners, all of our guests, sorry, is, you're still an ambitious guy. I'm sure you've still got underdog mode in your head. So in your pursuit of your own version of what a high performance human is, if there was one thing in your game that you feel you could improve on, what do you think it would be?
Yeah. It would be the ability to take more proactive time to analyze information.
Expand.
I'm a very gut feel kind of guy. I'm driven by intuition a lot, which serves me well. However, I miss a lot of opportunity because I don't delve into enough data in multiple areas of business, whether that be through customer data, whether that be through performance data, whether it be through project data. I miss a lot of opportunity just by proactively scheduling time to review information within my business. So I know, and I've got plans in place for that, but that's still the area for me that I need to develop far more.
Okay. I like that. Which is interesting considering that a lot of your work that you do with clients would be very data driven, right?
It is.
Isn't it weird how we're great when it comes to everybody else, but when it comes to listening to our own advice, we can sometimes completely ignore it, right?
Well, your business comes second to your customers. Your business comes second to your people. And sometimes when you're all consumed by those two major components, you deprioritize the things that can really amplify business performance. And that's what I've learned a few times and just need to be very, very aware of moving forward.
For sure, man. Ryan, I can't thank you enough. This has been an episode that has just so not gone the way it should have gone, but it's gone in a much better way. And I'm really, really glad we've gone down that track, man, because you've helped us to really shed light on a couple of things that will absolutely help people to move forward in their pursuit of what success looks like for them, and which is incredible, and it's what it's all about. But it's absolute gold, my man. So thank you so much for joining us on the High Performance Human podcast, mate. I am absolutely certain that the doors to this podcast are going to be left wide open for you to wander back in anytime, my man.
I'm happy to be here as many times as you want me to be here, Andy. It's a pleasure talking with you, mate. I thought you did a great job as well, sort of facilitating and hopefully getting what you wanted from me too, mate.
Gang, make sure that you go back through your notes for this one, please, because there's just a couple of bits in there that are red hot. You need to pay attention to. But until next time, though, team, on behalf of Ryan and myself, thank you so much once again for listening in and joining us. Please look after yourselves and each other. Stay safe, healthy, and happy. Until next time, we'll look forward to catching up with you again on the High Performance Human podcast. Make sure that you subscribe, and if you are happy and you're loving the content that we're bringing and the value that we're providing, please make sure that you review us as well. Take care, team. Look after yourselves, and we'll speak to you again soon.